So the first thing we're gonna cover off today is the scan and capture queue. So you may have noticed some changes in the way the functionality works. There are some updated guides and instructions coming out for that as well. But basically, we've made a couple of changes just around quality of life and around helping process invoices through, which should make the process both easier for you guys and the accounts payable team in the back end is designed for that. So without further ado, I'll get into the system and we'll kind of show you what's changed and how it all works now. All right, so just going to jump into the system now. I'm actually in the TS4 training environment, so that's another little thing. The training environment is back up and running, and you guys, if you need it, you can request access to it through FC Inquiries, and we'll give you access to it. Once again, it's just a sandbox. You can jump in, play around if you require it. So if anyone wants access to it, either just let us know in chat or send an email through to FC Inquiries, and we'll get you set up in the sandbox. It's basically identical to the live system, but just allows you to play around in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the scan and capture queue under left-hand menu, modules, accounts payable, and then scan and capture queue. Now, once again, most of the time you guys will be going through just the My Scan and Capture queue, but I'm going through this one just to find some examples for us today. So one of the big changes that you will have noticed in the scan and capture queue is that invoices aren't disappearing straight away. So this is obviously part after a bit of feedback we got about how people kept having invoices disappear straight out of their queues. So what's happened now is invoices no longer disappear when you do the receipting for them. What happens is a line gets created on that invoice, and then if the line matches the invoice total, there is a batch job that will pick those invoices up and remove them from your queue. So for those ones, the batch job runs, I think, every half hour, maybe 15 minutes, half an hour, so they will disappear from your queue. If you have invoices that are still in your queue but have this line created, this is because there's something further that you need to do. So this is the two things that I'm going to be covering today. So what happens when you have a line created and there's excess lines that you need to remove, or if the line's created and the receipt is incorrect. So the first one we're going to look at an example where we have multiple lines that have been pulled through onto the purchase order. So I'm just going to look for an example of this in the system. All right, so what you can see here, we have a number of invoices in the queue that are all assigned to a particular purchase order. Now we can see this first one has the line created against it. So what's happened is the first one in the queue has basically found all the receipts that have been done against this, and we can see it by opening up the invoice. I'm sorry guys, the invoice attachments aren't working in the training environment, but that's right, so I'll just hide that. Now I can see down the bottom here, right? There are a number of lines that have been created against this purchase order. So if I'd gone through and I've clicked generate lines, it's pulled all these lines in. And you can see up here in the top, so I'll just actually bring the attachment back so you'll see it how you would see it. You can see here this gross amount field, right? So this is the dollar value of the invoice. The field below it is the total of the constructed lines, which means it's the total of all the receipts that have been generated so far against this purchase order that haven't been used so far. So what's happened is it's pulled all the receipts through that we haven't matched to invoices, and it's tried to match it against this one. So obviously it's failed because the total of those receipts is far more than the dollar value of the invoice. What I can see here, if I go down to my line section, is I can see that we have a number of receipts, right? And we can see our product receipt number referenced next to them. So obviously we have our invoice number as a reference. So if I have a look down this list, I can see here that just down the bottom here, so this is the reference. So this is the correct receipt for this invoice. So what I want to do is I want to remove the rest of the receipts off this invoice because they're not matching to this one. So what I do is I select the other receipts. And I use the remove functionality to remove them from the invoice. Like this one. So you'll see this happen occasionally with some of the bigger blankets when you have maybe 5 or 6 open receipts going at any one time, and they'll all pull through onto a single invoice. You just remove them from this invoice. Right. So we just have the receipt line that we're interested in. So obviously this is the one that matches the invoice. And you can see now if I scroll back up to my total amounts, our gross amount is now equal to the total of our constructed lines, which is our receipting. And we can see that our status is now passed. So any invoice that is passed, they're the ones that are basically done. They're fine. They're the ones that will get picked up by the batch shop and taken out of your queue for you. So you just need to make sure if you still have an invoice in your queue, you think you've processed it, you check that the gross amount matches the receipt amount, and then that it's passed. If this has failed, it's either because you have an additional lines here against your purchase order that's pulled through additional receipts that we don't want, so you just remove them. The other example is there may be an issue with your receipt, so it may need to do a correction on that. So that I'll show that example as well. So this one's now all fine. So I'll just exit out of this one. So I'm going to bring up a different invoice that has a issue with the receipt. All right, so I've opened up my invoice, and we can see here straight away that in my total amounts that the invoice is supposed to be for $165.50. We can see our total of our constructed lines is $1,500, which means we've accidentally over-receipted. My guess in this case, the person may have accidentally receipted the full value of their blanket order instead of just receipting the dollar value of the invoice. Now, if we scroll down the bottom, we can see here our receipt line, which is showing us that this receipt is for this invoice, but it was done for $1,500, which is the full value of the purchase order. So if this is the case, we need to do a correction on the receipt. So to do a correction on the receipt, we need to go through the purchase order. So there's 2 ways you can do this. You can either go through the left-hand menu and you can go procurement and sourcing and all purchase orders. But just as a quicker way, you can just click on the purchase order number that's referenced here, and it will take you through to the purchase order. All right, so we're now back. The system's taken us to the purchase order that you would have seen multiple times before. This is the same section that we've previously looked at in terms of receipting and how to do this in the purchase order. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the Receive tab up the top, and under Journals, Product Receipt. Right, so we can see the receipt that's been done in the system. If I look at Lines, option at the top, it'll show me that, yep, we ordered 1,500, I've fully receipted 1,500, which is incorrect, as we know. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go under the Overview section. I'm going to click Correct. When I click Correct, it's going to bring up this next box. If I scroll to the right, I can see my receipt line, and I can see the value that I receipted. Now, what I want to do is I want to update this to be the dollar value of the invoice, right? So obviously $1,500 was a mistake. It should have only been $165 as per the invoice. So I'm going to update this quantity to $165. Right? The system will then show me how much money it's going to back out of the receipt. So we can see it's going to return $1,335 back to the purchase order. And so all I do is I click OK to do the correction. Guys, so you can see the system is currently processing the correction. Right, and we can see that our correction's been done successfully. If I just quickly check the lines again, we can see now that the received total has been updated to the $165. Right, so I've done my correction now. So my receipt should now match my invoice. So how to get back to an invoice the quick way, you can just close out because it stacks on top. So if we close this screen, we go back to our purchase order. And if we close our purchase order, it takes us back to our invoice. Now, the invoice hasn't realized that we've done the correction, so all I need to do up here is I click refresh on the top right. And we can see now that my receipt line has updated to $165. And if I scroll up here, my gross amount now matches the total of my constructed lines, and my invoice is now passed, right? So this will allow, and then this invoice will get picked up by our batch job and processed for payment. So this is kind of the big change that happened to Scan and Capture Queue. Your invoices don't disappear immediately. If there's an error with them, they will sit there with the line processed. You can basically jump in. You can figure out based off this total amount what's gone wrong with it, whether your receipt is too much, receipt's too little, if there's excess lines that are being pulled across, if it's system's pulled extra receipts, and you can do the corrections through there and then pass them on for processing. One thing to note still, if your receipt is short money, so if it's not enough, you will need to cancel the receipt and redo it. So the correction only allows you to take money off the receipt, not add money on. So you would have to cancel the receipt, which happens in the same place as the correction. There's just an option that says cancel. You cancel it, you redo the receipt, and then you'd come back here and click generate lines, and that would redo the receipt. All right, so that's the main changes that have happened to the Scan and Capture Queue. There are a couple of other little kind of quirks that are now part of this. So something a few of you may notice is that when there's a line associated to an invoice, you cannot assign that invoice. So if I go try and assign this invoice now, let's say done. Right, the system will give me an error saying the selected record cannot be updated. This is because a line is being created and it's waiting to see if it should be picked up in the batch job. Obviously, if you've done something incorrect and the line's still there, it won't let you assign it as well. So if you do need to assign it, let's say you realize it needs to be canceled or something of the nature, you just come down the bottom here, you remove the line by clicking remove, right? And then it will allow you to assign the invoice. If you accidentally remove lines and you want to get them back, you can just use the generate lines functionality. So if I click generate lines, it'll pull the receipt line back through for me. Right, so as we said before, clicking generate lines or post product receipt, it doesn't make it disappear from your queue anymore. So feel free to do them. If you remove the lines accidentally, you just use generate lines to do it. Something we have noticed for a few people using Internet Explorer, when you try and remove a line, this dialog box occasionally will clip behind the invoice image. If that's happening to you, you just need to basically get back in and out. And what you want to do is you just want to hide the invoice attachment. Right, using the button at the top, you hide it, you click remove, and then this will no longer be hidden behind the invoice image. So you'll be able to action this. once again, if you run Dynamics in Google Chrome, this won't happen at all. So, but it is some versions of Internet Explorer that are still clipping over the dialog boxes. We're still working on that. Okay. So I think that about covers the changes to Scan and Capture Queue. I think that's most of it. If you guys have seen anything or there's behaviors happening that I haven't covered or something you want to see, just let us know in chat and I'll cover it at the end. So one other thing I'm going to cover today, actually, sorry, one thing I will say, I wasn't planning on covering how to set up my purchase order tiles, so how to quickly set up a way to see only your purchase orders, just because we've covered that in the last couple of sessions of this. But if you do want me to show you how to set up a tile for just to filter to your purchase orders, let us know in chat, and if anyone's interested, we'll do that as well. All right, so one thing I am going to cover is I'm going to talk about purchase order statuses. So this has come up a few times. So when we look at the all purchase orders page, right, so within the all purchase order page, we can see our purchase orders have a number of different statuses. Right, so I'll just filter this list down a little bit. All right. So what we've done is I've just filtered the list down. So you can see here in our purchase order status column, we have a number of different statuses. So the open orders are purchase orders that are currently haven't been fully receipted, right? They may have been partially receipted, but they still have basically a deliver remainder. So they're still live and you still have things actioning on them. The other status we can see here is one that says received. Right. Purchase orders that have the received status means that they have been fully receipted. So we can see here from our product receipts that we don't have the ability to generate any new receipts. If I check the receipt, right, I can see that the receipt's been done for the full value of the order, right? So this has been done. Right. So received ones, you've fully receipted it. When the status says invoiced, that means that your receipts have been matched to an invoice, which means we've paid for the full value of the purchase order at this point, right? So that's the three kind of main statuses. We have open order, received, and invoiced. You will also see canceled orders. So when we cancel, we set up the status changes to cancel. The reason this is kind of helpful for people is you can actually set up views that only look for certain orders. So if you only want to see your active orders, you can set it up so you just apply the filter on the purchase order status. Right, so I'm going to set the filter just to show open orders. Right, then I'm going to lock once again, so we're just seeing the open orders. And as we've kind of previously demonstrated, we can use the options and the add to workspace option to basically create tiles that lock this in. So I'm just going to configure. I'm going to give it a name. So I'm just going to say, open purchase orders. I'm going to click OK. And that'll create a tile for me that does that. So once again, you can also do this. So you change the filter option, you change it to is not an open order, right? So what this will do is it'll show me all my orders that are in a different status, such as received, invoiced, canceled. And I can just apply a filter here. I'll add it to my workspace. Go configure. and I'll call it closed purchase orders. Right, click OK. And what I can now see, if I go to my dashboard, so I'm just going to jump back to Finance and Operations, back to my home page, going to go to my dashboard. Right, so I have a tile that takes me straight to my open purchase orders. I now also have a tile that tracks my closed purchase orders. So as a purchase order gets fully receipted, it'll move from this tile to the next one, right? And this will basically keep a running total of how many that you have active, and you still also have one for your closed ones, so you can go back and check the history on them. You can check the invoices that have been done against them and all that kind of stuff. So we do find the purchase order status is very useful, especially as you start raising, we get more and more purchase orders in the system. You're going to start building them up in your queue, and it makes it a bit easier for you to navigate between just the relevant ones you need to find, and then you can still look back and check your old closed ones as well. Okay. All right. That's kind of the content that I wanted to cover today. So if there's anything else you guys want to see, just put it in the chat and I'll go through it. So right now I'm going to go through a couple of the suggestions that have already been put in chat. So obviously one of the questions was about when will the updated guidelines and instructions be coming out for the scan and capture queue. So
we have updated the guide and it's on the Worksmart Dynamics SharePoint. If you go to the Worksmart Dynamics SharePoint and you go to I'll just show you. Can you open up the reference guides?
So guys, you go to the Worksmart Dynamics SharePoint site. It's under Reference Guides and Tools.
Go to Procurement. Sorry, How to Guides. So on the How to Guides and Procurement, you'll find number 8. Yeah.
So the guide's available here. Something to note with the guide is what we covered today is actually in the second half of the guide. The first half is the standard, how to use the scan and capture queue, reviewing an invoice, that kind of stuff. The stuff we covered today actually kicks in after assign, receipting, go. So the correction of receipts. So it kicks in at about page 14. That's what we've covered today. It's the content about, what happened, why do I still have an item in my scan and capture queue that has a line created but hasn't moved out, right? So that's what this part of the guide covers. The first part is just the general usability stuff within scan and capture queue, so it's still worth the read. But the second section from 14 onwards is what we've covered today, that content. All right, so the next question, so we actually had a couple of questions come through about checking payments for vendors. Right, so there's 2 ways you can do this that we kind of usually go through. So you can check against a vendor record. So to do this, you open up the left-hand menu, you go to Accounts Payable, and you go All Vendors. So what you want to do, you just want to filter in the list to the vendor that you want to check against. Right, so I'm going to filter for Brendan again. Right, so you select your vendor under Transactions, Invoices. So this will show all the invoices that have been paid against this vendor. Right, so we can see we have 2 here. You will be able to see the invoice image when you're in the live system. It's just because I'm in the training environment. Right, so you can do this for other vendors as well. So some vendors will have obviously more invoices. I'm going to pick a more popular one. Again, so we go invoices. Right, we can see a list of the invoices here. Right. All right, so someone has asked if they're in invoices, does that mean they've been paid? Yes. So this is the tax invoice journals page. Basically, it shows paid invoices. The next question is a PIN number, an indication of payment. I believe so. Sorry, we're getting a little bit more towards the financial side than I'm aware of. The fact it has a PIN number generated, I think, means that there is a financial voucher, and I think that does mean payment. Sorry. I might just jump to the profile. All right. So the next, the other way you can check payment against a vendor is against individual purchase orders. Sorry, skip that. So what you do is you go to all purchase orders. You find your purchase order that you're interested in. Right, so also if a purchase order has been fully invoiced, it shows up under that invoice status. So that's what I'm using to find an example here. Right, so I select my purchase order. I go to the invoice tab up the top. Under journals, invoice. Right, and this shows us the same basic screen that we had through the vendor record. It's the exact same process. You can see the vendor, you can see the payment voucher. Right, and you can see the amount here. So you can check either through the vendor, going through all vendors, or you can check against the purchase order in invoice. Okay, so the next question we've got is if a PO has been received pre-GST, so ex-GST, but doesn't match because it needs to be received inclusive of GST, the person's tried to receipt again, but it won't let you do it because the system validates that you've already received that invoice number. If that's happened to you, you need to go in and you need to correct the original receipt that you've done. So you go to your purchase order, you find your receipt, and you use this correct option here. So this is grayed out because an invoice has been paid against this, but I'll just find one that isn't. Actually, I'm going to jump back to training because I can actually do it in here. So guys, I'm just switching back to the training environment so I can actually do the correction without messing with someone's purchase order. So I'm going to find a purchase order that's been received. It would help if I could spell and put it in the right column. Right, so what you need to do is you need to find your original receipt, right? Find your purchase order, product receipt, find your receipt, right? And you want to cancel it, right? So if you want to get rid of the receipt fully, you just click cancel. It'll ask you if you want to cancel it, so you say yes. Once it's been canceled, it'll now allow you to generate another receipt using that invoice number. So you could repeat using this product receipt field here. that's what's causing your error. You just need to cancel the original receipt, and then you'll be able to do the new receipt inclusive of GST. All right, so another question just around invoices. Yeah, so if it's not in there, it hasn't been paid. If it is in there, it should have been paid. Already covered that. I covered this part. All right, so the next question we've got is, do the finance team manually put back in the scan and capture queue invoices? I have had one of mine that I'm sure has been paid to the vendor, and it's back again in the queue. Okay, so there is a slight possibility that we have a duplicate invoice that's come through the scan and capture queue. So what you want to do, you can check if it's been paid through the two mechanisms that we talked about. So if you want to provide the invoice example, we can have a look for you right now if you want. If not, just double check the invoice number, and then check the vendor record to see if that invoice has been paid. And if it has been paid, you can just return that invoice to accounts payable, tell them it's a duplicate invoice, and they'll cancel it for you. So we have done a little bit of work on this. We do know there are a couple of duplicates flowing around, but out of, I think, the 26,000 invoices that were in the scan and capture queue, maybe like a tiny percent of them might be duplicates. So we're still looking at that, but very it's unlikely that it's a duplicate. But if you do find it, just return it to finance, tell them to cancel it. All right, so I think at this point we've run out of questions in the chat. What we might do, we might give you a couple more minutes to put any more questions that you have in. If there's anything you want to do, you want to see or have me demonstrate, please let us know. I don't know if you've used the raise a hand function in the webinar. We don't actually see anything from that. So if you want something covered, please just put in the chat. We'll give you another couple of minutes, another 5 minutes if people want to put questions in. And if no one has anything, then we'll wrap it up early. So we'll give you a couple more minutes to put any questions in. Okay, so we have had a couple of questions come through. So the first one is, I have emailed my invoice on the 29th of the 11th and still can't see it in my scan and capture queue invoice number. So I can have a look in the system for you. I do know there has been some issues with the scanning solution and the rate that invoices are coming through. They're not coming through as quickly as we'd like. So it is possible it's been lost in the backlog. If you are looking for a specific invoice that hasn't come through, just get in contact with the accounts payable team. They'll be able to provide you with the status because they can check where it is in the flow through the scanning software and into the system. So you can check with that. I will have a quick look for that invoice now, so since you provided it. So just jump back to the prod. So yep, looks like that invoice hasn't flown through to the system yet. You'll have to check with the accounts payable team, and they'll should be able to provide you an update what's going on with that one. So sorry about that. So someone has asked for a demonstration on the tiles functionality, so I'll go through that again. So the main way that we use this is through all purchase orders. right? But you can apply this to every basic page you can find in the system. You can create a tile of it. So you can apply a filter, make a tile. So what you do is you always go to Options. You can use the Advanced Filter Sort option. It will also apply any filtering you put on the columns as well. So let's say, but I will just go through Advanced Filter Sort. What you want to do, so you can pick your criteria here. So for this one, I'm just going to, you'd put your own name. Let's say you wanted to filter the list down just to your purchase orders. So we'll put someone's name in here just as an example. Right. So you put your name, you basically set whatever filtering you want to set. Right. And we click OK. So you apply the filters that you want. Right. So we just filter down to one person, or you might filter down to yours. You might change it just to look at your open orders, or just the new ones, that kind of stuff, or just a specific vendor if you want. You might also set this up for someone else in your team. So if you job share and you need to see someone else's invoices or someone else's purchase orders, you've set up the filter. And then you go Add to Workspace. The workspace you want is always Purchase Order Receipts and Follow-up. Right, so you select that. Presentation is a tile. You just click Configure. You name it what you want. So, my purchase orders, or team's purchase orders. We click OK and generate the tile. You can also do multiple people's names. So if you are sharing with the teams or you want to check multiple people's, all you do is just in the Advanced Filter Sort, you just add multiple names, you just put a comma in between them, right? So I'll just add some names here. So we're just going to put a comma. Search by. Right, so we'll add an additional name. Hopefully my filter's correct. Right, okay. Right, so now my filter's looking for 2 people. Right, so once again, you can set it up so you can see multiple people, see your team, see other people. You just go Add to Workspace, Tiles, Tile, Purchase Order Receipt and Follow-up, Configure, give it a name. Right, click OK, and that'll set up the tile for you. If you set up a tile that you realize it's incorrect or you don't want it anymore, you just find it in your dashboard. You just select it, you just right-click it. There's an option that says Personalize, and then an option that says Remove. So if you accidentally set a filter up and it's only not showing you what you want to see, you just select it, remove it, and then just recreate it. Refilter it, re-add the tile. That's all you need to do. So someone has a question. I'm still having trouble making my invoice only take up half the screen. So not entirely sure about this, Robin. You may need to give us a bit more detail as to what's going on. I know some people are having issues where when they go into the scan and capture queue, it pops out the invoice as a separate PDF. So that's an Internet Explorer issue. We are kind of working with that. For some people, obviously I mentioned they're getting the invoice image options clipped behind the invoice image. You can usually hide the attachment to resolve that, but we might follow up with you in just regards to send you a message and see if we can help you with that. Okay, so at this point I think that's it. Once again, All the updated materials can be found on the Worksmart Dynamics SharePoint site, so we do obviously encourage you to go there. We will be redoing and updating some of the video guides as well, along with some of the other reference guides and tools, which can be found on the webinars and e-learning material. So we will be updating these guides as well as we go. And once again, you can also find copies of the Ask Me Anything sessions here. Someone has asked, will there be more seminars in the new year? Good question. We're not entirely sure what the plan is rolling out into the new year. It's probably going to come down to whether people want them, whether people still find them helpful. We probably will do one for when Bunzel gets introduced. So when we make the change, when the Bunzel catalog finally comes online, and we'll do seminars for any big changes to the system, but we will see about the ad hoc ones just for the Ask Me Anything. So we'll see how everyone's going and make a decision in the new year.
Right. And guys, you can find the recording of all the webinars that we've conducted. There's 6 of them on this webinars page that you are viewing on your screen. The recording of today's session will be uploaded tomorrow, along with the timestamps of all the questions that have been asked during the session. So I really encourage you to go through it. Thanks again for your support. Have a wonderful, wonderful break, and we'll see you next year. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.